Welcome to Table Saw. I'm so glad that you guys made the choice to join us for this very special episode. We are continuing our series on Hebrews chapter 3 with our very special guest today,
Yes.
Pastor Jeremy Fisher.
So glad to be here.
Man, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
This
Yeah.
series, man, is crazy.
Yeah.
I've learned something new every week from every pastor.
Yeah.
And I love that we're just kind of taking this deep dive in the book of
Yeah.
Hebrews. As you guys were preparing this, is there a big lesson that you learned from the book of Hebrews that has just stood out?
Yeah. Okay. So, anytime you get the chance to go through a book of the Bible and it be portion by portion, piece by piece, for me, the big takeaway for me has just been a little bit of a reminder about the fundamentals, right?
Oh,
like
yeah.
the beginnings, the main points of this whole idea of our faith. And so there's some things along the way you just kind of take for granted as a believer, and it's just, to you, it becomes old hat at some point. And of course, Jesus died for my sins, and I know the stories, and I know the reasons, but do you really?
Oh, man, it's so good. And I believe that's been a big takeaway. So just quick fire.
Yeah.
Just quick fire. Just the first question is, someone on Facebook this week asked the question, so who wrote the book of Hebrews? And for our purposes, we are saying Paul.
Oh, I was about to say, that's a new take. I hadn't heard that one. Yeah.
Paul wrote the book.
Yeah. So there is some debate over this. There's not a clear-cut answer. Some say Paul, some say it's Apollos, because the language that's used, and some people say it's somebody entirely different, maybe a teacher within the early church. We don't know for certain.
Yeah, and but we are certain that for the most part, the majority of evidence definitely points to Paul.
Yeah, I think that is an argument a lot of people make, and kind of the safe route, I think, in terms of authorship. Yeah.
But you don't want to just commit to that answer?
I don't know. Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I'm ready to stand
I don't
before
know
God
if I
with
am.
that
Yeah.
answer.
So to me, I like a little bit of the idea that there may
mystery.
be I like that. Let the mystery be,
No, that's interesting.
I like that. Yeah.
But speaking of mysteries, like Scripture talks all the time about, like, this great mystery has been revealed. And you are absolutely right. The biggest challenge of the book of Hebrews is that it's presenting these basic ideas.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask you, like, it's going to sound simple, and you'll have to forgive me if it sounds too simple at the beginning, but I feel like it's a really complicated question.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about sin that separates us from God, I want to know, what is it about sin that separates us from God, and why was God just not able to get over it?
Yeah.
Right? Because, like, if you come to me and you're like, I don't want to be around you, Rocky, because you're sinful, I would just be like, that's a you problem, not a
Get
Rocky
over it,
problem.
right? Yeah. This is such a great question, and I think unbelievers, people that are looking at our faith and saying, I don't quite buy in, I think this is a sticking point for them.
Oh, no doubt.
Nobody wants to feel like a sinner, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to feel like they've done something wrong or carry something within them that
and when we
would
tell
be broken or messed up.
And when we tell people in our church, like, oh, you have to evangelize, whenever you are sharing the gospel with somebody, part of it is, step number one, you have to accept the fact that you are separated from God because of your sin.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like good news. Right?
But why?
Yeah. So in the very beginning, God creates this beautiful creation, heaven, earth. There's the first two people that are on the planet in Adam and Eve, and a decision is made where sin enters the world through this act of disobedience, deliberate disobedience. And this sin that may seem like what's the big deal? Tasting of a forbidden fruit or whatever. Right. What's the big deal? Leads to generation after generation after generation after generation of brokenness. This one act. Sin is, simply put, like the original language, the word that it uses here is this. It's like an archery term, right? Yeah. So there's a target, and the target is perfection. That's what God has us aiming for. That's the standard, but we've missed it. Yeah. We've gotten off target at some point. There's that disobedience that's crept in, and that's landed us in this place that we call sin, missing the mark along the way. So, somebody would say, what's the big deal, right? Yeah. Like, is that really, if I sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but if
If you tell me, oh, like this guy murders children, it's easy for me to believe that guy goes to hell.
Yes.
But then you tell me, and I think this is a hang up, not just for people outside. If I ask the normal person who goes to our church, the penalty for sin is death.
Yes.
Separation from God. And I say, child murderers, they deserve to go to hell. And then I look them in the face and I say, you believe that. Now, what did you do that deserves the death penalty? And then they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, you stole gum when you were 5 years old. That's a death sentence.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't feel
And
right.
no, and the average person's like, what in the world?
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's wrestle with this for a second.
Fix this, Pastor.
Yes. So I want you to think about it like this. The penalty for sin, the penalty for sin is like sin gains its weight based on the dignity of the person that it is committed against. So let me unpack that for a second.
Okay.
So anytime you commit an offense, let's do some simple ones here. You punch a wall.
Right.
A hole is left in the wall. You've got to pay for the wall. That's tough. You gotta deal with the broken wall. Let's say you take the same offense, and this time you punch a dog.
Okay.
That's terrible. You're gonna have to deal with the owner. You're gonna have to pay a fine, maybe.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe PETA is gonna come after you.
Yeah.
Let's take the same offense, but this time you do it against, let's say you go to the supermarket and they're out of your favorite cereal or something.
Yeah.
And you're in the line and you're just ticked off, and so you punch the manager. You're gonna have to hear from the police.
Okay.
If you punch a police officer, well, there's no telling what could happen to you. Maybe some jail time. Maybe you find yourself locked behind bars.
Yeah.
If you take the same offense and you punch the president of the United States, something worse than jail may happen to you. If you
Right.
punch the Queen of England, something worse than prison may happen to you. You may lose your very life. See, the same exact offense against the dignity, like the rising dignity of these different levels of authority, has landed you in different levels of discipline. And
that's
different.
interesting.
You see what I'm saying here? So what I'm trying to get at here is that if you've got a finite offense, like you do something against an eternally holy God, it's not the duration of the crime that's the problem.
Yeah.
Oh, I committed 70 years worth of sin here. Is that really worthy of an eternity in hell? No, it's not the duration of the crime. It's the level of the dignity against the one who the crime is committed. That's the problem.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
That's really good.
When you've committed a crime against an eternal, holy, limitless God, there has to be an eternal, holy, limitless sacrifice that comes in that covers what it is that you've done.
Yeah.
This has been committed against a supreme being.
Yeah.
So if it's stealing a pack of gum or it's murder, it's all against a holy God. There
Wow.
has to be a penalty.
Man, that's really.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense.
That's
No.
a tough thing to wrap your
And
mind
it's-
around.
It makes a lot of sense actually, because we understand that. Like I understand, mouthing off at my sister is different than mouthing off at mom and dad.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mouthing off at the police, mouthing off at the president.
Right. Because
These-
of the dignity
Exactly.
of. Wow.
Yes.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And like we see this throughout as as you're unpacking your sermon, like there's this idea of the holiness of God that becomes a part of it, even in like the sacrificial system. And you do this funny thing in your sermon specifically, where you do the fine print, and you're like talking about prepping
Yeah.
for all of that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what does it mean for us to become holy as people? How does that happen?
Yeah. I mean, so can I take this question further down? Like,
whatever, teach me, man.
I think that, as we grow in holiness, you want to look more like Jesus, you want to walk as he walked, but I think you and I think we would all agree that our righteousness, like it's like filthy rags before God, right? And so all of those laws that we listed on Sunday morning, that fine print there, today, if we were to get 600 out of the 613, you'd say that's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Like you're living a pretty good life.
That's a really good life.
It's still filthy rags when your standard is perfection, right?
Yeah.
This is why the substitutionary atonement of Jesus is such a big deal. This is why Christians aren't over this today. It's why we still talk about this, and why we're evangelizing and preaching, and that's why we've got this whole sermon series, is to let this sink in, is that you on your own don't have a chance.
Right.
But with Jesus, the righteousness of God covering you, that's the only way to enter the gates of heaven and have a relationship with Jesus.
And you see this idea, you see allusions to atonement throughout all of Scripture.
Oh, it's all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
more, I was thinking about this earlier, like more Bible reading plans have been busted up by Leviticus, right? Than any other, it's like a pothole on your Bible reading plan. But I was going through it in preparation for this message, and Jesus is all over
That's
it.
how I know you love us, is that you're willing to force your way through the
I'm
book of
sacrificing
Leviticus.
here, right? Yeah, I'm just
During
drudging my way
Leviticus
through.
to teach us. I
Exactly.
appreciate it, Pastor.
Yeah, but I was reading it earlier, and I was like, man, he's everywhere.
Yeah.
His fingerprints are all over this. In the book of Genesis, like, you remember right after Adam and Eve commit that first sin,
Yeah.
God steps in, and there's the first animal sacrifice.
Yeah.
He clothes them with these animal skins. How beautiful is that? That God, I mean, from in Genesis 3-4, right? He's right there.
Yeah.
Sacrificing. And, people, I love, every time I bring this up, there's always one person that's like, man, why would God do that? Those animals are innocent. And that's the point.
Right.
There has to be there has to be a sacrifice, a sinless, spotless sacrifice to step in.
And you see it over and over again. You see it through the sacrificial system that's set up in the temple.
Yes.
You see it in the illustrations in the Passover ceremony, the covering of the blood. You see it in the idea of Yom Kippur and
Yes.
Rosh Hashanah, like the most sacred time of the year when they're celebrating New Year, but they're also celebrating atonement, and they have to sacrifice a perfect lamb, and they have to send a scapegoat out.
You got it.
And it just keeps going, it's going.
Yeah.
And none of that was enough.
Yeah.
And so, like, you're going through when you're preaching your sermon, you're talking about this. Like, I get tingles when you're saying, and all of these things, and they were nothing compared to Christ. So
Yes.
what is the difference?
Yeah.
Why wasn't it enough?
So I love this. I love this so much. God is such an artist. When you read the scriptures, it would have been enough for God to just put in a list of rules and say, do it.
Yeah.
It really would have been enough. But he's such an artist that even in the sacrificial system, there is like foreshadowing,
Yeah.
These were meant to be temporary atonements here. They would never last for eternity. These are temporary atonements and a foreshadowing of what's to come. And so all of these things, it's amazing. They would, without even fully knowing it, they were looking forward to Christ the way that we look back at Christ.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we get the privilege of being on the other end of the cross. And so we get to read all these layers of foreshadowing here, and we're like, oh, that's what that was.
Yeah.
But to them, they were looking forward to a day.
Yeah. And so God's intention from the beginning was always that he is going to have to intervene.
Yeah. Oh, this was the plan from the start.
From the start.
Yeah.
And so Christ enters into the picture, and specifically, I guess we're talking about, and he was a better priest.
Yeah.
He was a better person to act on our behalf towards God.
Yeah.
And how does that, what now? I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
And I've been a Christian for 30 years.
Yeah.
30 years into it, why does it still feel brand new? What is it still, what does it have for me?
It's funny that you say this. I led a CG last night for another church. They were hosting a small group. They said, hey, will you come over? Somebody asked a really similar question, and it was talking about Jesus being the high priest, and had said, what does it matter, this idea that he's a better priest? Like, what does this do for me now? Yeah. And I think everybody would understand if Jesus had come down and had lived a perfect life and didn't struggle, and Jesus had crossed his T's, dotted his I's, just lived this perfect life. That would have been enough, like we were saying earlier. It would have been enough. Jesus goes up, dies on the cross, goes up to heaven, never hear from him again. But it is amazing that he suffered.
Yeah.
He limited his omniscience. He limited his knowledge, wrapped himself in human flesh. The reason why we say he is a better sacrifice and a better high priest is not just because he fulfills the law and he is the bigger picture of what all these sacrifices were pointing towards from the past, but he's better because he relates to us.
For sure.
And he knows, like, Rocky, the things that you struggle with, the things that your heart is broken over, the things that you're insecure over. Jeremy, the things that your heart is broken over, the things that I don't want to share, don't want to say, don't want to admit. Jesus has walked through those things.
Yeah.
He knows what it is like to have this flesh that we have, and yet he willingly went to the cross.
For sure. And I think again, these are such foundational beliefs to our faith that I love that we're talking about it. And I think, I've been in ministry for a couple of decades now, and the repeating pattern is it always goes back to that. Yes, I believe that Jesus' death was propitiation, was substitutionary for my sin.
Mm-hmm.
And the hang up for most believers is that they don't actually believe that they were ever really separated from God. And they will say it. Yeah. They will say it. And they will know it.
Yeah.
But they don't always really believe that their sin was bad enough to separate. And until you get to that point to where you understand that, then how do you even begin to understand the meaning of the sacrificial system?
And Rocky, this is so fascinating to me, but this is something that people have played this self-righteous game from the beginning. You don't even have to be like a religious person to play this game. If you go and you interview, I was watching an interview of prisoners a little while back at, I can't remember what the prison's name was, but they had arranged themselves all on their own in a sort of caste system within the prison. So these are all violent criminals.
Yeah.
And they had said things like, well, yeah, what I did was wrong, but at least I'm not like that guy.
But at least I'm not like that guy.
But at least,
because our sense
I
of
murdered,
justice,
but at least I didn't kill a child, right? They arranged themselves in such a way.
Because we put ourselves at the center.
Yes.
And that's why I loved it, like at the beginning when you just laid it out, and it's like it's the dignity of the one whom you offended.
Yes, that's what it's about.
Because he's at the center.
Yes, he is at the center. Once you get that, once you understand that, it's like all of this starts to make some crazy sense, man. The sacrificial system, sin, separation, it just takes on new life whenever you realize it's not about me, how bad, how messed up I am. It's about the dignity of the person that I have offended. That's what changes all of this.
Pastor Jeremy, thank you so much for that lesson. Thank you for just delving into the Word and being able to communicate that so well to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for being here. And thank you guys for being here. Thank you for watching this with your groups. If you would like to see the other episodes of this series, make sure that you check out our YouTube channel, Community Life. Like, subscribe, share with your friends. Let's get the word out. If you love Table Salt, let's spread the word. This thing is worthwhile. We love you guys, and we will see you next time.